Good morning. My name is Angela Gibson. Thank you for joining us. As you know, I'm with Abraham's Consulting, and today we're going to be talking about immutable storage, how to level up with ransomware readiness. Welcome to the 3211 world. I'm looking forward to hearing Sean Massey of StorageCraft/ArcServe speak to us today. Abraham's Consulting has 4 practice areas, the first of which is to provide the vast majority of hardware and software to our prospects and clients. The second of which is to provide niche solutions in the area of storage, networking, and security. We provide staffing services, technical staffing services, where we vet solutions or vet talent to put on our client site. And we also we have a managed service practice as well. Today, the focus is within our niche solutions, and that's why we've partnered with ArcServe to present the immutable storage solution. So thank you again, Sean and Mike Arnon. We're looking forward to hearing what you have to say. And should you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll respond to them as the time goes by. So once again, thank you and welcome.
Thanks, Angela. Once again, my name is Sean Massey. Whoops, I kind of skipped ahead there for a second. I'm the Director of Sales Engineering for North America for ArcServe. I've been around, I came by ArcServe up through the StorageCraft ranks. I started working at StorageCraft about almost 11 years ago. And I've done a lot of different things, and so I'm happy to be here. And thank you very much for allowing us to speak to you today, Angela. And we'll just get right on into it. Just real briefly, StorageCraft and ArcServe, we recently merged. This was earlier this spring. We really have come together to become. We're in the top 5 of the data protection vendors in the world. So we're real excited about that, and we've just continued to improve all of our different products that kind of go with that. Speaking of products, this is our solution set, and really I'm going to focus in on right in the middle where we say OneXafe immutable storage. I'm sure that no one here that is attending right now hasn't heard about ransomware or hasn't thought about ransomware, and so this immutable storage is really going to be where we position it as a very key element into helping protect data from the risk that ransomware does provide. So let's talk real briefly about really what's happening in the businesses today. Really, the biggest piece is that we're looking at data. Data is really out of control right now. We've been seeing just this explosion over the last several years. According to our analysts, the world will store 200 zettabytes of data by 2025. I mean, just think about that for a second. 200 zettabytes, and 50% of that is going to be all in the cloud. Right, so that is just mind-boggling when we think of that. Then this third statistic: 90% of the world's data has been produced in the last two years. That again is we're just constantly have this data churn that's happening and happening. Now, the biggest piece of this is actually it's going to be unstructured data. And what I mean by unstructured data, that's going to be certainly your Word, Excel, your PowerPoints, your pictures, other types of images, video. Video is huge right now. There's compliance pieces across the U.S. Where folks have video surveillance and they need to store those for a certain amount of time for whatever the case. Certainly. In some of the law enforcement areas with body cams, they have all of this recording. They need to store it. They need to be able to access that later. And so this is all unstructured. It's something that certainly is a challenge. And part of making this a challenge is we move into really this malware or these bad actors that happen to be out there. And we see this, all day, every day in the form of ransomware. And let me tell you, I mean, when I think about bad actors and I think about, people who are writing code, these aren't folks that are, sketchy looking people, in a back alley. These are millionaires that are writing this ransomware code, and they're hoping to extort money from the users. We're seeing that the cost of ransomware by the end of this year, which we only have 3 months left, is going to be around approximately $20 billion. That actually might be a little bit low from the actual, because still today, many folks that get hit by ransomware are not reporting it. So there's a lot of underreported pieces that are out there, and they're paying the ransom to be able to do that. Now, I know that the cost of downtime really depends on the size of the network and everything, but for the averages across that we have, it's $5,600 per minute. And then in addition to that, we're looking at $300,000 per hour. And every 11 seconds, we're seeing another infection, a ransomware infection, where folks are not able to access their data. So overall, we've got, when we look at this boom of unstructured data, we're seeing more data to manage, which means more data to protect, which is also more data to recover when things go sideways. So the modern ransomware, we've seen the accounts over the past 3 months. Colonial Pipeline certainly got hit. They had a $5 million cyber attack force. What they did is, when they initially got hit with ransomware, they did not know immediately the extent of it, and they ended up shutting down all of their systems. And those systems were down for several days, which then on the East Coast certainly caused gas prices to rise. JBS is the world's largest meat supplier. They got hit with 11 million cyber attack with ransomware. $11 million is what they ended up, paying out. And then now I've also put up onto the screen actually several technology companies. And it's not necessarily to call out the technology companies specifically, but no one is immune to this. No one is immune to the susceptibility of ransomware. And we all have a big, target, certainly on our back. And because of that, we need to make sure that we're taking the appropriate steps to do so. Now, how do we look at ransomware to prevent ourselves from getting hit with ransomware? Let me first of all say there are no silver bullets. I wish there was. I wish I could say, hey, if you do this, you won't get hit by ransomware at all. Because there's no silver bullets, what we actually need to do is we need a comprehensive approach to ransomware. And I'd like to start with, cybersecurity. And when we look at this is a layered approach. This is everything from what's happening on your edge of your networks, like your firewalls and your antivirus, and certainly identity access management. And then we need to move from the cybersecurity and have a good strategy for recovery, right? That recovery makes it like we need to make sure that our backup and disaster recovery programs are secured. Okay, and what do I mean by secured? Like here at ArcServe and StorageCraft, we have a big bullseye on our back, and that bullseye, and it's not just us, it's going to be every data protection vendor that's out there, because when you think about the likelihood of a company or business or organization to pay the ransom dramatically goes higher if the backups are encrypted, if the local backups are encrypted, right? So we've got that big bullseye on our back, and what we need to make sure is we've taken all the appropriate steps to make sure that we've secured everything. 3, 2, 1 backup, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that. 3, 2, 1 is certainly the the backup strategy, and as we start to look at, some of the industry trends now, is to add an additional one on the end of that. And I'll have more of that in the next slide as I kind of build that out. And then immutable storage. That's also the part of what we're talking about today, is this notion of being able to write our backups or write our data. It doesn't have to be backups, but writing our data, right? That actually prevents it from being changed. Okay, it prevents it from ransomware coming in and all of a sudden encrypting everything so you can't access it, right? And then finally, we've got the cybersecurity, we've got the orchestrated recovery. Processes is our key, right? We can put all the money that we want into cybersecurity and also into our data protection plan. But when we have employees that they need to be more savvy now, right? We need multi-factor authentication. The days of having password as your password, or your dog's name, or your spouse's name, those are gone, unfortunately, right? So we need to have hardened passwords. We need dual or multi-factor authentication, which actually gives you, where you have to put in something like your password, and then they have another way of verifying that it's you that's doing it. And then making sure that we go through all the DR exercises that are out there. And then, of course, finally, some training, ongoing training. And even at ArcServe, we received an email, within the last week saying, hey, here is an example of some of the phishing. And when I say phishing, I like to fish, but I'm talking about phishing with PH, not an F at all, but PH, where they're trying to do some social engineering to trick you to click on the attachment or to go to a website that is been compromised. So this whole piece, this whole circle, this life cycle of ransomware protection is a very layered approach that we all need to take seriously and be able to do that. So typically in the backup and recovery world, we had what we called a 3-2-1 approach, right? And I'm just going to kind of build out these slides here real quick for a second. The 3-2-1 approach would be, over here on the left, we see our users, and they're accessing, the servers, the network, and all that good stuff that happens with that, right? The network, actually, that's the 3-2-1 starts with 3 copies of the data. And the first copy is your servers. It's the production equipment that's there, right? That's the first copy. The second copy then is the backup software that will then put it off to a backup repository. And then the best practice then is to have the third copy to be somewhere else offsite, right? And part of that the 3 of 3-2-1 is this notion of, hey, we need to protect ourselves in case somebody deletes or something gets corrupt or whatever locally, right? We can restore. And then if we have a catastrophic event, then we're looking at, hey, we need to bring it back from offsite. So the 3-2-1 is just 3 copies of the data: production, backup, and then a third copy somewhere else. Most likely that's going to be offsite. And the offsite piece is actually going to be double dip in just a second. I'll talk to you about that. The 2 of 3-2-1 is 2 copies on different media. Now, I don't mean, oh, hey, I need it to be on disk and I need it to be on tape. What I'm really talking about here is, in fact, I was involved in a situation within the last couple of weeks where we had a business that had their virtual machines, and they had this NAS appliance that they were using that actually contained that they were running all their virtual machines off of, right? But then on that same NAS, they carved out, and the NAS also contained all their backups. So they were sending their backups. Well, that was on the same media. That was on the same piece of equipment. And what happened, as you might be able to guess, is that NAS appliance died. And when that died, not only did they lose all of their virtual machines, they also lost their backups. So then they had to go off to the offsite backup in order to start being able to do it. So the best practice then in the backup world is to make sure that we have 2 copies that are on different media. And then finally, we would like to have 1 copy on a separate location, and that would be offsite. That could be, you know, a cloud offering. StorageCraft ArcServe has cloud offering. It could be a different location if the organization has more than 1 location. And then that way, if again, in the 3-2-1 sense, if something happens catastrophically, then we're able to bring that back. Now you might say, okay, you've been talking about 3-2-1. What is this additional 1 that we mean? Well, the problem is ransomware blows up this whole 3-2-1 scenario. And what will happen is they've got, with ransomware, you've got the bad actors, and sometimes there's a payload that they trick a user into launching. Sometimes they will look for vulnerability and actually just get straight in onto your network. But what they'll do is they'll launch a payload and they'll start encrypting. And when they encrypt, it's going to start with the servers, and it's going to be backing up. So it's going to be backing up those servers. So then your local backups will actually have copies of those servers, but they'll have encryption inside those copies, right? And then if we're replicating offsite, it's going to replicate that backup offsite. So what will end up happening is that in the 3-2-1, in a ransomware scenario, it is potentially possible and actually probable that all the copies of the data will have some sort of infection of ransomware. Right? So that's where we would like to look at doing some type of immutable copy, right? And what that's immutable copy is, it utilizes, you know, in the sense of, for our OneXafe that I'll be talking about in a few minutes, uses something called worm. And that's not something at the bottom of a tequila bottle, right? So what worm stands for write once, read many. And so what we're able to do is we're able to write, so locally have this immutable storage that would be there, and then we're able to, you know, when we write data to it, the backup data, that it is locked in and it can't be overwritten, right? Another strategy that some folks are doing is called air gapping, and I've just kind of outlined it up above. Air gapping is a manual process though, and typically what you do is you take a backup copy, you copy it off on another media, and it's not accessible. It's not on the network, it's offsite, but it's also not accessible through the internet. The problems with air gap is that your recovery point, you know, your data might be more stale because it is a manual process. There's a lot of effort and energy that kind of goes through that. You're getting it off. Maybe it's to tape, right? Or something like that. And you've got it off. If you're having to go from bring something back from the air gap, it's not going to be recent data. It's going to be since the last time that you got that off there. So kind of as a challenge, as I talk about, ransomware can be pervasive through a 3-2-1 all the way through. That's where we'd like to add that additional 1 piece. If you have separate primary storage, typically it's difficult to manage, inefficient, and it's costly. And often we have multiple vendors required to put together a complete solution, right? So you're trying to do that, and actually we've got this point now where we can have our not shadow safe, but OneXafe appliance that can go really nice and meet this need, meet the need of some of the challenges that we have with the 3-2-1 piece. So with our appliance, our scale out and object based, what it is, first of all, it's immutable, right? So the snapshots that we take starts at every 90 seconds and then kind of go on out there, and it is taking a snapshot of really the data that is read only, right? So we're actually not necessarily preventing ransomware on it, but what that means, if ransomware gets on it, we can very quickly and easily recover files, folders, or actually I can represent a whole share within a minute. Very easy. Scale out, what I mean by scale out is what it allows you to do is allows you to expand very quickly and easily without having to do any massive forklift upgrades. If you have one unit and you start to fill up that unit, you can add another unit, tie it in there. That's starting out the build out of the ring, which then you are able to have that whole storage that gets basically added under the same namespace, which is nice because it's more of a pay as you grow. Whenever you spec out traditional storage, often you're trying to figure out, okay, how much am I going to use over the next 3 years? And then sometimes you hit it on the nose, but often you underestimate because there's always something that, oh, now we've added all of these cameras that we need to store the data, right? And then you go through it too quickly, but then you have to buy whole new storage and figure out a way to move everything over. Here, we can just keep adding the storage as you end up going. It is object-based, which actually gives you that scale out storage piece. And what I mean by object-based is that traditional storage is going to use more of like a RAID level, and it's protecting the disks. What we do is we're object-based and we're protecting the data, right? So we're either, if we're doing RF2, which is replication factor 2, or RF3, which is replication factor 3, what that means is we're writing either 2 copies of every object or 3 copies of every object. And then if you do encounter like a hardware failure, we can be able to withstand simultaneous failures, like one drive simultaneous failure for RF2, or 2 simultaneous drive failures for RF3. And then what we've done here, and I've got a slide that actually will be able to go through it, is we've given you really more of a NAS experience with this. So we've built out the ability you can present these shares as either NFS or SMB protocols to be able to do that. So when we think about immutability, we are thinking about fixed data. It's unchangeable. It cannot be deleted. It's impervious to ransomware infection, right? And then we're also looking at why that is really good is it helps you not only with the protection, but also your compliance piece. We're seeing now the cybersecurity insurance. The insurers now, because they're paying out a lot of money for these ransomware attacks, they are very, very much involved in now specifying, hey, we need to know what your backup strategy is. We need to know, do you have stuff offsite? Do you have immutability? Are you air gapping? All of those different types of pieces that are there. And what this allows you to do ultimately with Immutable storage is it allows you you can guarantee your recovery. You're going to be able to recover, right? And if you're able to recover, then you don't have to pay the ransom. And that really is neat. But it even goes beyond that, is that it's not just paying the ransom or from that standpoint, but it's also getting back up and running as quickly as possible. So how does it work? We're actually presenting with our system. It's proprietary file system that actually gets presented as a service. The data gets written to the share. We're taking continuous snapshots of that share, right? And then because we're doing that worm, if you remember, write once, read many, ransomware cannot change anything that's on that immutable snapshot. And then let's say all of a sudden ransomware infection happens all the way through the environment, including the OneXafe, right? But I can, from a command line on the unit itself, I can then promote a new share from the snapshot. So I can restore an entire share within a minute or two for a nice clean restore from any of the snapshots that we would be able to have. So if you probably would spend a little bit more time to say, okay, which share are we going to, or which snapshot are we going to restore from? That's really kind of the piece that's there. So scale out, what does it bring to the table? As you have this unstructured data that is just booming, allows you to just build it as you go. We can have up to 7 nodes that would be in this cluster or a ring that would work as one unit of storage that happens to be there, which is kind of nice. So briefly, just now, I'm going to go into geek mode for a second. traditional storage, we had a SAN that uses block protocols, that's Fiber Channel or iSCSI. We had the block store that they did with some vendors like EMC and NetApp. They took that block store and they put like a NAS head on it to be able to access it, but they're still RAID and it's not able to scale as well. And then Apple and Facebook actually started doing an object store, which is object-based, that's there. But all of these were REST APIs. And because they were REST APIs, very, very complex to be able to access it. And then what we did is we basically took that object store and we put the NAS head on it to be able to access it a lot easier, a lot quicker, right? We have a couple appliance models. What you need to know is the 4400 series. The 44 actually gives you the model. The last two numbers gives you how many drives that are there. So we're 2U. We can handle the 4412 will have 12 up to 12 terabyte drives, and the 4417 can handle up to 17 12 terabyte drives. That's in there. So which is nice. And then we have the usable capacity there based on whether you do RF2 or RF3. All right, and I'm in the home stretch now, so I just want to really kind of go through a couple of the use cases. The NAS appliance of just being able to handle unstructured data where people can store things, which is great. Secondary storage, and the secondary storage could be like production servers that have secondary storage on it. They can actually you can store it out onto our OneXafe cluster that's there. We can use this as a backup target, right? And we're not locked into the backup program that ArcServe has. So with whether it's Shadow Protect SPX or whether it's ArcServe UDP, certainly we can be a backup target for both of those, but we can also be a backup target for Veeam, for Commvault, for Veritas, and others that happen to be out there. And then this could be also a way of being able to do another layer of backup archive. So if you already have storage for your backup, whether it's ours or whether it's Commvault or Veeam or Veritas or whatever, then you can actually place this in and do another copy to that, and that gives you that immutable protection that would give you the -1 piece that's there. So basically, in a nutshell, it just really we're going to open it up to questions in just a second. So be thinking, and you can go ahead and type in the questions into the Zoom app that's there. But we've got a really complex and some challenges ahead, especially when we think about malware and bad actors that are out there. And the design of your backup and data protection pieces and your data recovery has not been any greater. When we look at the way that we can position, storage and using, modern technologies to be able to help protect the data from getting encrypted, from getting susceptible to those bad actor type of pieces, the OneXafe is a perfect fit for that. So with that, I thank you and would be happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
Someone asked if they can get a copy of the presentation sent to them.
Sure, Angela, what I'll do is I'll try to get the presentation over to you. It's about 20 meg, so it's with all the graphics and stuff. So, and then you can figure out a way to get out to folks that are there. But yeah, that'd be great. So we can do that.
Well, one of the things that I really appreciate about the solution is the fact that you can recover your data and not having to pay the ransom. And that part stayed with me for sure.
I mean, most definitely. And, and I think there's still, there's quite a few organizations out there that don't realize how much their data is really, when I say how much it's worth, I'm not saying that you would send it, but when you can't access it in everything that it involves, as far as trying to get trying to get people back working in production that's out there. You know, I mean, there's lots of things that can disrupt data. And when we talk about disaster recovery and business continuity, for instance, you know, we don't have to look any further than the pandemic that we're still in, and seeing how that has interrupted, you know, supply chains and everything else like that. But I'll tell you, I like to smoke meats. And, you know, my colleagues know that, you know, I'll do my smoker, I'll do the brisket and the pork shoulder and all that kind of good stuff. But one of the things that I do is I make my own bacon. And bacon, the pork belly has more than doubled in the last 6 months. And part of that is I'm in an area that is all the meat is sourced through JBS, right? So that when they ended up paying that amount, and it was probably mostly their insurance company, but of course their premiums are going up, it makes things a little bit harder. If they manufacturing and things, if they don't know what to manufacture or how much they need, it can really have a huge impact on the supply chain.
Wow. Ian asked a question. He wants to know if your company provide tech support during office hours or 24/7. I
think the answer to that is yes. I mean, there are, we do have emergency support that is 24/7, 365, to really allow folks that are just in that need to be able to access everything that's there. But yes, the answer to that is yes.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. And, you know, just let's onward and upward, and let's try to protect ourselves the best we can. All right.
Absolutely. Have a great day. And thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Alrighty. Bye-bye.